So you're just starting out in the hobby, but you're not a snake person. You like your reptiles with legs. Well, stick around because I've created a list of what I think are the top 5 best pet lizards for beginners. My name's Pierce LaValle, this is Pierce's Planet, and let's do it. Yo, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about our four-legged friends, the lizard. This is a top 5 video for the best pet beginner lizards. Now, this whole list, like I said before, is just a opinion of mine. These are what the lizards that I think are the best when you're a newbie starting out in the hobby. So things that I look for when I'm creating a list like this are things like the temperament of the animal that I'm talking about, the size of the animal, because you don't want something that's too big or too small and delicate. I also look at the price, you know, how much the upfront cost is going to be to buy the animal, then the cost that it's going to be to take care of the animal for the rest of its life, and also its availability, because, you know, if it's not available, how are you ever going to find it to buy it? And, you know, I might throw in there, you know, some other things like that, like things like morphs and stuff like that as well kind of play a factor into it. But those are kind of like the main things. And so that's kind of what I think about when I make a video like this. And so these are just the animals that I think best fit that mold altogether. And so you might disagree with some of the things that are on this video. You might agree with some of the things on this video. This is just kind of try to help a new somebody who's new coming into the hobby. This is trying to help them out and make their decision a little bit easier. I think I've done enough talking. I've done enough rambling. I know I can go on and on sometimes. So let's just get straight into the list. All right, so starting off the list at number 5. Is probably one of the most popular pet lizards in the world, and that is the bearded dragon. Now, the bearded dragon, I was torn. I didn't know whether I was gonna even put it on this list or not. You talk to a lot of people and it's pretty much 50-50. Some people think that these are the best pet reptiles out of all of them. They think they're the best pet lizards, and other people think that they're, you know, for a little bit more experienced keepers, a little bit more intermediate keepers. Myself personally, I don't think that their you know, their care is hard enough for them to be intermediate. If you do your research and know what you're doing, you can take care of a bearded dragon. Anybody can take care of a bearded dragon. A kid can take care of a bearded dragon. It's really just a matter of, you know, of how much research you're gonna do. I think they're great for a multitude of reasons. The first being their size. They have a great size. They get up to like 2 feet. And that, you know, when you have a bigger lizard like that, that's a perfect size to hand off to a kid. It's a good lizard to have because you can hand it off to a kid and not have to worry about it getting injured. Their temperament is also amazing. They are really docile lizards, and they're really sweet lizards, and they're one of the few lizards that, you know, seems to almost look like they actually like having human interaction, and they'll just kind of like chill with you and sit on your shoulder. When they're small, like Mercury here, they can tend to be a little flighty, a little bit more nervous, but the more, you know, once they get used to you, they're perfectly fine, and they just are. They're beautiful lizards. Mercury's actually in shed right now, so his colors aren't really popping, but he is a bright red. I've had bearded dragons before. They're the most popular lizard in the world for a reason. They are a desert species, so they don't need humidity. Their humidity is gonna be anywhere between like the 20% and even they can go up to like 40% range. But you don't have to worry about humidity. They're available everywhere. I mean, if you go to a pet store, you're going to see a bearded dragon. You're gonna see bearded dragons, you're gonna see corn snakes, you're gonna see ball pythons, you're gonna see leopard geckos all the time. You're going to. They do have a few setbacks, you know, one of them being their diet. They eat a lot. As babies, they're gonna eat 2 to 3 times a day. And that could be a lot for a lot of people to try to keep up with. And their diet changes from when they're babies to when they're adults. When they're babies, they're gonna eat almost all insects. When they're adults, they eat almost all vegetables and fruit, mainly vegetables, and less insects. So that could be a con because you have to switch up their diet like that, but it's nothing too major. They have a really hot basking spot. It's gonna be around the 100-degree range. Could be an extra cost for you, which could be considered a con, but like I said, nothing really too crazy. Another con is they do need a bigger enclosure, and most lizards, you know, with their size, you know, a snake that's the same size as a lizard is gonna need less space than the lizard would, if that makes sense. So even though they're only 2 feet long, they do need a somewhat big enclosure. Minimum enclosure size for an adult would probably be a 4x2x2, which is what I have Mercury in right now. And that's a minimum size, and that's a pretty decent size enclosure. So that's gonna take up a pretty decent chunk of your wall. So that could be a con. It's just something you gotta kind of think of. But all in all, just all around great pets to have. Very cool to look at, really fun to watch eat and chase their food around. Could be higher. I really struggled with whether I was gonna put them higher or not. But could go higher, but for right now, they're at number 5. Okay, so coming in at number 4 on the list is the northern blue-tongued skink. And it was really a toss-up for me. I really couldn't decide whether I wanted the blue-tongued skink or the bearded dragon above each other. I just couldn't decide. I didn't know they're both great lizards. The truth is, I've never owned a blue-tongued skink. I have owned bearded dragons. I've owned 2 bearded dragons. And I love bearded dragons, but from what I've heard from people, from the research I've done, people I've talked to who have owned blue-tongued skinks and love blue-tongued skinks, they just barely edged out the bearded dragon. And it's really for minimal reasons. And one of those reasons is they are about the same size, but they don't need as big of an enclosure because they don't like to move as often and as much as bearded dragons do. They also don't need the verticalness of a bearded dragon enclosure. Bearded dragons don't need that much of a vertical enclosure, but they do like to climb a little bit. And blue-tongued skinks are skinks, and if you've ever seen one, they have these they have these slender bodies with these little stubby legs, as most skinks have. That's why they don't like to move as much. They don't climb as much. They don't need that airspace, and so they can handle a little bit smaller enclosure. So a 2-foot blue-tongued skink can handle a 3-foot by 1.5 by 1.5 foot enclosure, whereas a bearded dragon, 2-foot bearded dragon, is going to need a little bit larger enclosure than that. That's nothing that's too big, but it is, when you're saving any type of space, it helps. The only other thing really that is better about a blue-tongued skink, in my opinion, is that they eat the same diet as bearded dragons, but for one, they don't have to eat it as often, even though you definitely could give it to them as often as you would give a bearded dragon. And it doesn't change, their diet doesn't change for when they go from a baby to a full-grown adult. Bearded dragons, as babies, they eat mainly insects. And then as they get older, they get more greens in their diet. Blue-tongued skinks eat the same thing their whole life. It's gonna be the same thing. Fruits and vegetables, they're omnivores, fruits, vegetables, and insects their whole life. That's another thing that is a little bit better for a blue-tongued skink than it is for a bearded dragon, but either one of those you can go either way with. As far as temperament, blue-tongued skinks have great temperaments. They will rarely bite. From what I've heard from people who own them, they rarely bite. They're super docile and super nice. Require moderate humidity, but not too much. It's about 40 to 60%. If you live in a place like I do in Sacramento, that means you don't really have to spray. I would spray them probably once a day. Eating is about the same as a bearded dragon, so their basking spot is going to be around 100 degrees. That could be a con somewhat because just that extra electricity cost, but nothing too crazy. It's not gonna break your bank. They do have some morphs. I've seen some morphs. I don't know how many they do. I know they don't have anywhere near as many morphs as like bearded dragons or leopard geckos do, but they do have some morphs, and you can find them mainly online or at reptile shows. Their availability, this is kind of where they lose some points, and they probably could be higher on the list if they're a little bit more available. I didn't know what a blue-tongued skink was until like 2 years ago. And I wouldn't say it's a problem, because if you know where to go, you'll find them for sure. But if you're going to like if you're just starting out in the hobby, like when I just started out in the hobby, I only went to Petco and PetSmart, which is something I do not recommend to people, and I'll tell you why in a later video, but definitely don't use those places anymore. If you go there to a place like that, Petco or PetSmart, they may or may not have a blue-tongued skink. If you go to a reptile specialty store, they'll probably most likely have them. If you go to a reptile expo, they're for sure gonna have multiple blue-tongued skinks. So they are somewhat available, but just not as readily available as other species. So not too expensive, relatively inexpensive to keep. just great pets. Myself personally, I'm not the biggest fan on the way blue-tongued skinks look. To each his own, and everybody has, you know, their opinions. I have a skink of my own. It's not a blue-tongued skink, but I do have certain skink species, and they are very interesting looking, definitely interesting looking. But if you like that look, then the blue-tongued skink, the northern blue-tongued skink, is definitely a great pet and probably the right pet for you. And they're great pets for beginners. They have a great size. You can handle them, give them to children. You don't have to worry about them hurting them too much. Just really great pets to have, and that's why they come in at number 4. So number 3 on this list is the African fire skink. And this is the first animal that was on a previous list of mine that is now on this list. It was on my top 5 best pet reptiles for beginners video. If you haven't seen that, go watch that video. And these guys are just great. I love African fire skinks. I think they are awesome. If I would have known about them sooner, I probably would have more of them. They just are really great pets. Charmander is amazing. Beautiful lizards, which is part of the reason why I put them on this list, just because of their beauty. I mean, that red is just amazing. And their temperament is great. They have a great temperament. They're really friendly. They're really curious and really inquisitive lizards. You can tell that they're just like taking in their whole environment, taking in their surroundings, and it's awesome to see. Great feeders. They're one of my favorite animals to watch feed. I've said before, you know, when you feed them, they bite into their prey and then they shake it, and they shake it like a dog would shake it like a chew toy. A great size when they're full grown. A Charmander he's like a sub-adult. He's not really a juvenile anymore, not an adult yet. They don't get too big, they don't get too small. They actually are like that really perfect size for a lizard. With a skink like this, Charmander's in a 20-gallon, and he might be able to live in it his whole life. I do plan on upgrading him, but for now, for the majority of his life, he's gonna be fine in that. And that's what makes him such a great pet for a beginner. They don't really need that much humidity, even though they are more of a tropical species. They live in, like, I think it's the Congo in Africa. These guys care, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's kind of like the northern blue-tongued skink, except they're gonna eat more insects than they are fruits and vegetables. I wish more people knew about them, and I wish more people bred them. That is one of their biggest cons, is that they are hard to find, or harder to find, captive bred. And most specimens that you're gonna see, most fire skinks that you're gonna see, are going to be wild caught. There's really 2 cons to fire skinks. The first one being there's not that many captive bred ones. The second one being they are pretty fast and squirmy. If you don't have a good hold on them, or if they dart off on you, it's really hard. They're slippery animals. That's part of how they, you know, get through the holes and get through the tunnels that they dig. Just really hard animals to keep up with. But if you got one that's tamed down, if you can tame one down, they can turn out to be really great. And right now he's being super calm. I've actually never seen him be this calm before. Usually, you guys have seen my videos, he's usually trying to run away and get away from me all the time, but today he seems to be doing fine. It's kind of crazy. They just have these personalities. Like, it's really hilarious, the personality that these little lizards have. Don't you do it. Don't you even think about it. Look at that. I mean, look how cute they are. Look at the cute little face. If you want a cute lizard, if you want a super cute lizard, get an African fire skink. Look at that. Look at that little face. All right, so number 2 on the list, the runner-up, and that is the Crested Gecko and the Gargoyle Gecko. I'm gonna add the Gargoyle Gecko in here. This is another animal, the Crested Gecko. This is another animal that was on a previous list of mine, the top 5 best pet reptiles. And I didn't add the Gargoyle Gecko in it, but I think I should, because they are really similar, both from kind of like the same area. So I decided to throw that in there. But the Crested Gecko and the Gargoyle Gecko, these geckos are really great lizards to keep. They get a good size, a good decent size. They're not too small. As babies, they are small and delicate, but they will get bigger and less fragile. They need a vertical enclosure because they are geckos, they are arboreal. And the enclosure doesn't have to be that big. It's not gonna take up that much space. Another plus for Crested Geckos and Gargoyle Geckos is they are nocturnal, which means they aren't going to need or require UVB light. Now, that's not to say that UVB light wouldn't benefit them at all. It's just to say that if you don't want that extra expense, you don't have to do it. and that's a really good option to have. They like to jump around, as you'll see Rango probably do a couple times in this video. You always got to keep your hand in front of them because they are jumpy. They will jump out of your hands very quickly. Last time in my last video, Rango jumped onto the camera, so hopefully he doesn't do that again. Another great thing about them is that they have their own pre-made diet, and you don't have to feed them live insects. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. They have these powdered diets, you know, and some of the brands are like Pangea or Rapashi. And literally, you mix it with water and mix it together, and that's it. That's all you have to do, and that's what they can pretty much live off of for the majority of their life, for their whole life. Another great thing about crested geckos is that they're not too expensive. You're going to be spending about, you know, $40 for a captive bred normal. If you want to get into some morphs, they're going to be a lot more money, but nothing too crazy. And that's really just your choice on what you want your crested gecko to look like, or gargoyle gecko to look like. The cost for it to keep them is also not that expensive because you can buy those powdered diets. You don't really have to be constantly buying food every week for them, which is a great thing. They just average temperature, you know, they like a cooler temperature around 75 degrees, 80 degrees. They're available everywhere, which is a great thing about them. You can find them at all reptile shows. You're gonna find them at every pet store. Just really great lizards to keep because they are so available and you'll see them everywhere. Great temperaments, they're not gonna bite you, and even if they did bite you, it's not going to do anything because you're not going to really feel it. Now their tails do fall off a lot. That's just something that they do for defense. That could be a con for some people because, you know, I don't know, just a majority of crested geckos you see are going to be missing their tails, and that could be, you know, a turn off for some people. I love those big eyes. You can't see them right now, but I love those big wide eyes on them. Nocturnal eyes for them. I love the way they jump around. Just really great lizards. I really was against, for whatever reason, I really was against getting crested geckos. I think it was just because I was like, that's a gecko that everybody gets. I want something different, and I kind of held out on them. But now that I have one, I could see why everybody just loves them so much. They come in at number 2 because they are a little smaller than the number 1 on the list, and they are a little bit more fragile than the number 1 on the list. But crested geckos, great. They're number 2. All right, you guys, and number 1, the champion of all lizards. The champion of all lizards. Number 1 goes to the leopard gecko. I mean, if you've watched the previous video about my top 5 best pet reptiles, I told you, you can make a case that the leopard gecko could be the best pet reptile out there. Their attitudes are great. Their size is perfect for a beginner. So they don't need huge enclosures. I have Leo, he's full grown. I have him in a 20-gallon long, and he does just fine in there. They are just awesome lizards altogether. They are insect eaters, so they're gonna eat insects. They have these fat tails that they can drop, but they don't, because why would you want to drop it? Look how pretty it is. They come in so many different morphs. It's insane. It's almost like ball pythons, the amount of morphs that leopard geckos come in. Their pricing is, they're very cheap because they're so readily available everywhere. Any pet store you go, you know, you're gonna see ball pythons and leopard geckos for sure, and bearded dragons. For sure you're going to see them. They are just one of the top lizards for a reason. It comes down to that temperament. They can handle a lot, they tolerate a lot, and they are just really nice lizards to have. They are a desert species, so they don't need, you know, that much humidity. Moderate humidity, probably around 40%, like I said before. They're very hardy lizards too, so they're very forgiving in terms of if you're making mistakes with their care. They tend to be really hardy, and they're not gonna die on you just, you know, like that with one, you know, mess up. So you have room to learn as you go when you get a leopard gecko. They're pretty slow lizards too, so they're not gonna run away from you. They're not super fast. You're not gonna have trouble handling them. You do have to be somewhat gentle and somewhat delicate with them, but nowhere near as much as with like a crested gecko, which is probably one of the main reasons why leopard geckos got that number 1 spot and crested geckos stayed at number 2. They're one of those lizards that one of those few lizards that I talked about earlier that seems to enjoy being handled. There seems to be able to tolerate it. They like getting pet, you know. It almost looks like they have like a little smile on their face. They're really cool. They could easily beat out any other reptile for a top reptile list. And I would have no questions about it. I love them. I'll probably always have a leopard gecko because of how great they are for beginners, for intermediate, for experts. You know, I feel like everybody has a leopard gecko no matter what level you're at. And there's a reason for that. They are amazing pets, and it doesn't get too much better than them. So leopard geckos get the #1 spot. If you're going out to the pet store and you don't know what type of lizard you want yet, I would recommend a leopard gecko. So there you have it. There's my list. These are what I think are the top 5 best pet lizards for beginners. What did you guys think? Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys disagree with me? Are there some lizards that I left off this list that you think should have made it? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and also share this video. Let's get some people over here. Let's get some different opinions in the comments. I want you guys to start dropping ideas for videos in the comments. I want to start taking the ideas that you guys have for videos in the comments and then creating them for you, because you guys are the ones watching it. So what do you guys want to see? What do you guys want to see, you know, my future videos to have in them? Give me some ideas in the comments and I'll look through them and choose some, and maybe that will be a future video for me. Until next time, everybody, my name is Pierce LaValle. This is Pierce's Planet, and remember, it's all about the reps, baby. Peace. Mercury 2 times a day. It's recommended that you, oh, god damn it. And also I might throw in there, you know, I throw it, you know. So you like reptiles with legs. Well, when you have a lizard when you have a lizard that size, recommend them to everybody if you can find them captive bred. Oh no.